Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. Even as the new IMF Chief warns of a synchronized slowdown across the globe and specifically points out to India and Brazil as economies where the slowdown is even more pronounced, there are many who see the first signs of a rebound in various indicators, like online festive season sales hitting the $3 billion mark for the first time, or India's largest multiplex chain owners and managers saying movie tickets are still selling briskly. Many are seeing hope even in a luxury car maker's statement that they have delivered 200 vehicles in just a day. But there is equally and more painfully a barrage of data on the other side showing indications that the pain in the economy is far from over. So which one is it? Are we truly seeing signs of recovery, or are these anecdotal examples of flash in the pan, a mirage in the desert? Before we begin the debate on this, let's first listen in to IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva speaking on the global slowdown.
In some of the largest emerging market economies, such as India and Brazil, the slowdown is even more pronounced this year. Uncertainty, driven by trade, but also by Brexit and geopolitical tensions, is holding back economic potential. And even if growth picks up in 2020, the current drifts could lead to changes that last for a generation. If the synchronized slowdown worsens, we may need a synchronized policy response.
All right, joining me for more on this today are R. Gopalan, former Secretary of the Department of Economic Affairs. I'm also speaking with R. Sriram, resident editor from Economic Times, and Pooja Mehra, author and journalist, joining us on the show for the first time. Pooja, welcome. Glad to have you on the India Development Debate. Welcome to all of you, in fact. R. Gopalan, let me start with you. So I've set a very simple premise because a lot of people want to see, honestly, some sign of optimism. So they're pointing out to the fact that, a huge Japanese brand opens in Delhi and sells over 2 crore rupees of merchandise in the first 2 days. Where's the slowdown? A luxury car maker delivers 200 vehicles on one day. Where's the slowdown? What is the picture according to you, Mr. Gopalan?
Well, these are all possibly some blips which are coming through because some sentiment of festival coming in, but the uncertainty remains as far as the various aspects of the economy is concerned. I don't see, look at the numbers, I find that all your rural sector is stressed very badly. The consumer credit credit card credit may be growing, but not in other areas. Industry credit in net credit is negative. So I don't see, you look at the consumer confidence surveys or you look at the industry outlook survey, you look at everything, there seems to be a slowdown still not bottomed out. Maybe in the fourth quarter of this financial year, there is a possibility because of the base effect, plus from all the steps that have been taken by the government so far, there is a possibility that there could be some amount of uptick as we go along. But the damage that has been done for the first 3 quarters of this fiscal, that will drag the overall growth for the fiscal 1920.
Okay, so again, one realizes that this is not an either or kind of situation. No one is suggesting that things are already bright and sunny and shiny, but are we seeing anything concrete in sort of the festive season initial trends is what we're trying to suss out. Sriram, let me come to you on some of these points. Now, a lot is being made of the e-commerce sales and $3 billion being clocked according to a consultancy. The companies themselves have not put out figures in the first week of those sales. And then, people ask then if there is no money or no consumption demand, then why are they buying? How do you look at the overall picture?
The economy is recovered from the slowdown that has been happening for the last couple of quarters. But I do think that the consumption sector and certain areas of the consumption sector have bottomed out and are looking to bounce back. Now we've got to wait and see for a couple of more months and a couple of more quarters to see how this pans out. But the initial signs are a little promising. If you look at car registrations, the actual retail car sales, and not the wholesale numbers that SIAM puts out, there has been some amount of pickup and increased activity in September. We got to see whether it sustains and performs well in October, November and December also. The home loan growth continues to remain strong. It's not actually growing at the gangbuster that it used to grow a couple of years back, but it's still doing a decent mid-teens kind of growth. The certain consuming industries, consumption industries, consumer firms are doing well, and whatever we have heard from some of them, of course Titan had a bad quarter because of hedging costs and all that, but even there, if you look at it, some aspects of Titan sales have actually done well. If you look at e-commerce sales, again they have done well. I think you also need to recognize the fact that a lot of the slowdown has also been caused by what I would think is a consumer shift or a consumer preference for a very different kind of product or a different kind of experience, or at least growth in certain markets doing better than growth in other markets. For instance, one of the aspects in this e-commerce thing has been the fact that a lot of consumers want value buying, and much of the growth has actually come from the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities. We saw that in the consultants report that was released yesterday, which actually means that the sales in urban areas and the urban metros are not growing very well, especially when it comes to appliances and color televisions and stuff like that. Now I think if you look at it product by product, sector by sector, there is a lot of variation, and it appears that people are shifting towards a different kind of products and a different kind of experience, and the growth is probably actually coming from different areas of the country rather than from the urban metros, where there is obviously a lot of saturation that has already happened. As I said, we have to wait for the October numbers, we have to wait for the second quarter numbers to see how this plays out, but I think we have seen probably the worst of the consumer slowdown. I think it's probably going to bounce back from here.
Okay, so an optimistic note coming in from our Ram Puja. Where do you weigh in on this? And it's more than just wanting to see the glass half full. We have seen some push from the supply side in terms of some measures that the government has taken in recent times, corporate rate tax cuts, etc. Nothing much on the demand side. Do you think the festive season can be a trigger for push, and value which is being provided by huge discounts can push some of those sales?
Tamanna, I think the festive season will create a certain blip in the long-term trend that we have seen now for more than a quarter, but I still worry if it will sustain, and the reason is that these are numbers especially when we look at online sales, the penetration is low. Only 10% of India's pin codes, total number of pin codes,
volume increase.
Actually, the penetration of online retail platforms is just 10% of total pin codes in India, and 200 luxury car sales in a country as large as India is actually not that big a number for it to be an indicator of a turnaround in the consumption sector. So whereas because so many steps and some very bold steps have been taken with regard to corporate tax cut, etc., this is certainly something positive. But if it constitutes a turnaround, if it even is a lead indicator of a turnaround, I don't think so, because just last week we've seen what the RBI's consumption confidence surveys have shown. India's GDP growth projection has been cut down by RBI. The monetary policy action itself suggests that there is going to be continuing weakness. So I would not take these pieces of information coming as any signs of a turnaround. I don't think a turnaround is going to happen so quickly. This is just, a response to the steps that have been taken, the positivity, some bit that has got created, which has come at the time of the festival season in the country. And more needs to be done to build on this if we really want a turnaround in the economic sentiment and the trend.
More on that, of course. One more factor which is being cited as not a turnaround but as a positive factor is in fact CMIE data, which talks about rural employment, the highest in 3 years. Just a quick programming note, we will be speaking with Mahesh Vyas ahead on the show as well, so do stay tuned for that. Let's talk a bit about then what we're seeing in the global context, and I'm opening up the debate now. If anyone wants to come in, please indicate, I'll come to you. When the IMF chief talks about a synchronized slowdown across the globe, even goes as far as to say that we could see the impact of this over a generation. Arshiram, let me start with you. How does India now start tackling with what we've seen? She is specifically talking about the impact being more pronounced in India and Brazil.
Well, you got to see what the IMF chief is obviously basing her data on. Obviously, she has very sound numbers that she must be having to actually talk about the slowdown in this manner. But given the fact that exports as a percentage of GDP or trade as a percentage of GDP in India is not as high as in some other emerging markets, how much of the global slowdown is actually affecting India, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't bet on it. I think the slowdown that we have seen so far in India is probably very intrinsic and probably something that has sprung from the problems and inefficiencies and the weakness and the lack of policy that we have seen elsewhere in across the country from the government and from other sectors also. So I think we have to look at the fact that much of the slowdown is caused by a credit problem, given the NBFC's issue, a shift in consumption pattern, a high cost and probably high prices of some products like cars and stuff like that. So the investment slowdown, which is actually, and there's nothing new about the investment slowdown. The investment slowdown has actually been happening or is being present from say 2013-14 onwards, and except in the case of the government, there has been no pickup in investment activity. I mean, private sector has obviously done a fair bit of investments and now they are holding back and consolidating, and some of them who are actually investing are doing investments worth about a few thousand crore or 500 crore and stuff like that, which is not enough to probably move the needle in any way. Investment slowdown hasn't really seen any kind of a pickup or a rebound, and I think it's probably going to stay that way given the fact that we have the credit problem and we have the banks' reluctance to lend to industry, which we've seen from the RBI data as well. But banks' credit to services, which is a very big portion of our economy, of our GDP, is still growing, and it's still growing in probably high single digits, though it has come down from the kind of levels that we have seen so far. So I think there are a lot of factors that are probably intrinsic to India, a lot of factors that are probably sprung from our own problems that have actually caused the slowdown. So I'm not so sure about how much the global slowdown, and actually the global slowdown, one would think that the FDI inflow into India, the FDI inflow would actually have dropped or would actually have pulled back in a significant way. But we have not seen that. Even last year in 2018-19, the FDI numbers were quite good. They were on par with the previous year. And this year, the first quarter so far, the FDI numbers are high. I mean, they are more than 10%. I don't know the exact number, but they have grown more than 10 to 15%. So we have not seen any kind of a slowdown there. So I think there are some very unique Indian factors that are responsible for what has happened in the last 9 months or 1 year.
Okay, so then back to that context, whether we are seeing any changes in those very unique Indian factors. I want to welcome Gopal Agarwal to the conversation. He heads the economic cell of the BJP, the party in power right now, and the one that is trying to push ahead India out of the slowdown through its government's policies. Mr. Agarwal, we're discussing over here whether we're seeing any signs of turnaround, or are these just too premature to start celebrating if a luxury car maker delivers 200 cars in a day? How does it juxtapose with the fact that the RBI has actually reduced the GDP target time and again, and this time down to 6.1%?
No, the economic parameters are always fluctuating at the various depending upon the condition. It's a projections and predictions what are being taken care of. But ultimately, the issue is that we are moving in the right direction. The issue of structural hindrances and the problems in the economy have been tackled the government is tackling about, initially the government looked after the credit availability, all the issues have been taken care of, and ultimately government investment will also pick up the whatever problems industry or economy is facing. Government is very proactively taking care of.
Yeah.
We have seen such a massive reduction of the corporate tax rate. Now today government has announced such a increase in dearness allowance. All these will increase the cash availability with the people. Ultimately the one problem that the economy was facing, that there has to be a more demand. So government is now focusing on generating demand, and demand will come from the
how is
rural
that going to
areas.
happen, Mr. Agarwal? Since I have you here, let me ask you, how is that really going to happen? And I know you say the dearness allowance has been increased, but it's going to a very targeted small section of society. Babus will be very happy. Hopefully they'll spend more this Diwali. But what about everyone else? How are you going to boost demand, say, in rural India?
Ultimately the demand in the economy come from the liquidity. Already corporate tax, the government has given a reduction of 1,45,000 crores. Now this around 16,000 crores further tax, this salary incentive is going to the public. Then the issue of other, government has planned a massive investment outflow of 100 lakh crore over this coming year. So this all will create demand in the economy, liquidity in the economy. Then the cycle of various initiative of the government, from credit availability from the banking sector, reducing real interest rate, even you see on the labor reforms, also government is moving ahead with the 4 labor codes. Ultimately how the economy will move? It will move when the government is responsive, government is taking care of every problem that is arising.
Okay, that's your perspective. Let me see if others,
after every challenges,
let's see if
we are reducing
others
GST,
agree
we
with
are
you.
reducing corporate tax,
Yeah,
we are
GST, the GST
making
Council
credit
reduces, Mr.
availability.
Agarwal. Yes, let me see if others agree with your perspective that whatever needs to be done is being done. Pooja is smiling there, so I'll come to her. Where, you know, the context of the debate also is, for some reason we are in such a polarized society right now that even when you have you know, some consultancy firm coming and saying that look at how much people have spent online, they say that look, where is the slowdown? Now it's neither here nor there, but your comments, Pooja, on what the government has done so far and whether the demand side issues still persist and whether there's enough light on what to do there.
Tamanna, I think the demand side issue most certainly persists, and which is why there is a, the RBI's projection, GDP projection has been cut. They have talked about capacity utilization. The latest data on manufacturing is manufacturing growth is just 0.6%. Why is manufacturing growth just languishing at 0.6%? Because there isn't enough demand, and that is why there aren't sufficient. There isn't a revival in investments because industry doesn't see why they should expand or set up new factories. And all of this comes down to the fact that the tools with which governments, and this is not just the government in office right now, but the tools with which successive governments in India address these kind of problems is either pay commission or a dearness allowance, or the RBI when they when they provide when they reform the way credit disbursement takes place. All of these, we have to now begin to look at what is the reach of all of these measures. Are they reaching the segments of society and the economy where the slowdown is being felt the most? And I think the slowdown is probably being felt the most in rural areas, and especially rural areas where agriculture is concerned, because agricultural prices have not been doing well, and therefore agricultural incomes are not doing well. And as consumers, we all feel good about that because that leads to savings for us. But that's not good for farmers, and that's not good for other people who live in rural areas and depend on farm incomes. And I think PM Kisan was one idea which was introduced in the interim budget in February, we are yet to see any results on the ground of that scheme, which tells us that either the money is not reaching the intended targets, or the money that is reaching is insufficient and probably needs a relook. Probably there is need for some other schemes to address that segment of the economy. And once the and that segment of the economy was also the worst hit by demonetization. So you can keep giving DA, but what will government employees spend on? They already have cars, they've already got money locked up in houses. Their fridges are well stocked, their houses are well stocked. What are they going to spend on? A lot of them are spending on sending their children overseas for education. That money is flowing out of India. So, as the former member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Ratan Roy, has been explaining for a long time, this is actually what is the structural problem in the Indian economy. And that part of it, I do not think any of the many steps, many of them are very good steps that the government has taken, but that particular part, that structural imbalance between different segments of the economy, I don't think the government has so far been able to come to terms with it and formulate a strategy for addressing it.
Okay.
And I think that is where focus is now needed.
Two bits of data on, Gopal Agarwal wants to respond, but just two bits of data on the rural economy, both from CMIE. I already spoke about one where employment seems to have picked up, though it's more to do with, heavy rains and monsoons and how that has...
I think CMI explained that is a bunching of jobs.
That is a bunching of jobs. Yeah.
Sowing because of good rains.
Yes.
So
in fact, I will be speaking to Mahesh a little while earlier in more detail. So yes, absolutely, you're right, Pooja. That is more of a blip. In fact, even the e-commerce sales, though there has been an increase to $3 billion, the fact is that Redseer itself, the consultancy firm that put out this data, had projected much more, nearly $4 billion. So,
and I want to reiterate over here that online sales.
Tamanna,
one second, Gopal. 1 second, Mr. Agarwal. 1 second. Yes.
The reach of online sales is just to 10% of the total number of PIN codes in India. We're talking about a very small section of Indian society.
Fair enough. Like I said, this is not about glass half full or glass half empty. We're trying to understand if there's a directional change, and which is why I'm getting a wide range of views on that. The other bit of data which I was referring to is again CMIE data, which is looking at consumer sentiment improving in rural India. This is data they've put out recently as well. I don't know if it actually will translate into more demand in rural India or not. I'm not saying that. Yes, Gopal, you wanted to come back on some of the points Pooja made.
When you are talking of such a large economy with 130 crore per population, there is bound to have some problems. If you just list out the problems, there will be there. But ultimately, the issue is that the government has tackled many of the problems, and it is continuously tackling it, and that will give the result. If we have good monsoon, it will help the government effort. If we have a revival in the rural economy, it will help. Ultimately, the sentiment also helps into revival. So we have been talking that there is no need to talk of being recession when you are having a fastest growing economy in the world. You are fifth largest economy in the world, and you are talking there is a recession. Where is recession? Recession means a negative growth.
You walked into that one all by yourself. You walked into that one all by yourself. It's our job to talk about the economy every day.
What we are talking is, we are telling that the government is determined to reach the target of $5 trillion economy.
That's great, but the government's determination alone is not going to help. It's not going to help. It's our job to see every day what is happening. That's excellent. It's excellent. That's a roadmap. So it doesn't mean we're going to shut our eyes and wait till the end.
No, I am telling you what is happening. We have reduced the corporate tax in spite of all the challenges. We have cleared the NPA problems. The credit availability from the bank is being solved. Real rate of interest is being reduced.
Credit disbursed is down 87%. Mr. Agarwal, 87% RBI data. Okay, wait, anyway, I don't want to get into this fight, so I'm just going to move on. Yes, Mr. R. Gopalan. Okay, let me just once again reiterate before I go to Mr. R. Gopalan. Are we saying that the government of the day is doing nothing about it? No. But the fact that the government is seized of the issue doesn't mean we're going to stop talking about it or that it's going to go away.
No, we are working on that.
Excellent.
And
That's
it is
the
showing
job.
result. Your data today shows that. And
Which data shows that?
Data today shows that.
Which data shows
PMI,
that?
other, all the things. Though the reports which are coming for IIP production, everything, there are sectors which are increasing. The
IIP, I mean,
new
I don't know which
sectors
data you're
are
looking at.
coming up.
Okay, Mr. Gopalan, let me come to Mr. R. Gopalan. I've got his audio fixed back again. Yes, Mr. R. Gopalan, let's, you know, glass half full or glass half empty. I think it's important to understand where we stand so that we keep the pressure on and the focus on what we need to do. Especially in light of now a statement saying that this could be a synchronized slowdown across the globe that could impact one generation. For me, that was one of the scariest lines from what the new IMF chief said.
Okay, let me go ahead with, I agree with Sriram when we said the point that, I mean, our exposure to the world trade is partly about 20%. So, it's not going to impact us so much. So as far as the economic growth is concerned, but let us look at the fact that there are steps that are being taken by the government to grow the economy, but still if you look at an RBI number of 6% average growth for this fiscal, from 5.1% for the first half to get into 6.9 for the second half is a good growth. It is not something which one need to look very badly at. Look at the kind of headwinds the economy is facing. The RBI, the credit growth is not growing so much. But maybe for the purpose of 8.5 a nominal growth, maybe 11% growth rate may be reasonable, but it is not sufficient. You get into the rural areas, stress in the rural areas is very much there. Maybe this monsoon is good, probably it is going to help to grow in the Rabi in a very bigger, better way. But the unorganized sector in the rural areas is still suffering. NBFCs had a problem, liquidity had a problem, and therefore credit reaching these people became a problem. And therefore, that is one area which is still stressed. There are pockets where the growth is taking place, but the question that we need to look at is this a big holistic kind of a growth? Maybe that, with a 6.8 or 6.9 for the second half of this fiscal, with a 5% growth rate in the first half, maybe a 6% growth rate will be there, but then look at it from 5.1, 5.2 to 6.8, 6.9 in the second half is a good growth rate if what RBI says is true, but RBI seems to be revising the numbers downwards with every monetary policy committee meeting, and I am not sure where they will end, but still I am from some of the indicators which are coming in from various places, there is an uptick which is going to take place in the second half. There are lead indicators which are coming in.
Okay.
One looks at that and one gets the feeling that there is going to be an uptick. That's I think that it is not correct to say it is half empty. I will say it is half full. That's the way I should look at it.
Okay, so let me hold on to that. Are we all agreeing on this panel that we are moving towards an uptick in the second half? Are we all agreeable to that? Ashiram, let me come to you first.
Definitely. And the growth will come from the rural economy.
Yes.
I agree with that. There is going to be uptick in the second half.
Okay, yeah, use your
On the consumption side, yes, definitely
Ashiram.
there will be an uptick. Yeah, on the consumption side, yes, I think we have seen the worst of it, and I think we are going to see a revival. I don't know how strong the revival will be because we got to wait for some more data to come in, but I think there will be an uptick in the consumption side. On the investment side, yes, I think the problems that have plagued the industry over the last so many years are continue to persist. Agriculture is a different problem altogether. I think it's going to take a long time to resolve it, especially when we talked about good monsoon. Good monsoon is very good for production, but it's also bad for farmers, producers' prices. So we are probably going to be happy as consumers that we are not going to pay more for vegetables or cereals or oil seeds or something. But at the end of the day, the farmers are not going to get the prices that they want. Then it's not going to be. It's going to be the same story all over again. So well, yes, there is. But also let's also remember that the rural India, the non-agri portion of rural India is also very significant. It is not just about agriculture, it is not just about farmers. A lot of rural India is also non-agri, and while they may depend on farmers and agriculture to some extent, there is a lot of rural industries and a lot of work in the rural areas that is happening, which will keep demand up. And I think if since the monsoon is good, we are probably going to see a much better second half for rural India than what we saw in the first half.
Okay, Pooja, let me get you to come in on that. Monsoon is one factor. Festive season, you said, is just a blip. If we are going to see an uptick in the second half, then it'd be interesting to know what has pushed it, then what has changed.
Tamanna, I'm not so sure. I don't think this turnaround being talked about, how strong it is going to be, if at all there's going to be a turnaround. Because let's not forget that we have to also look at government spending, and especially government spending at the level of the states. Last year's data, which has just been put out on the RBI's website last week, shows that state governments have been reducing their expenditure, their development expenditure. And if they are going to stick to the FRBM targets, they are going to have to do that this year as well. And especially in rural areas, but also in the overall economy, what determines the multiplier factor, of government spending is almost twice at the state level than it is for the central level. So I'm not, and we are already, if we are seeing a major slowdown right now compared to the growth rate 2 years ago, part of the reason is because states have reduced their capital expenditure in order to keep their fiscal deficits in check. And if they're going to continue to do that this year, then I think that is going to be a much bigger factor than all the other factors we are discussing right now. And I think consumption is linked more to that. So I'm not so sure we are going to see this turnaround, that is being talked about, and which is why I want to reiterate that we cannot afford to feel that we have done a lot and now everything is going to be hunky-dory. No, there are many steps that have to be taken. I think we have just made a beginning in accepting that, government needs to act. But what needs to be done, I think a lot of work has to be done still. We cannot be complacent at this point thinking that consumption is going to turn around.
And there are some very key points there made by Pooja. Let's not get complacent, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, since you've been talking about this roadmap. Another big expectation from the government is that this slowdown, and if you don't want to call it a recession, don't, but this slowdown is giving us an opportunity to make some bold long-term reforms and changes which otherwise may have been difficult and politically difficult to push through. You can actually do it right now.
Definitely. No, the government is already working on those reforms which are required. The biggest reform that the country needed was reduction in the corporate tax. That has been taken, and now even the real estate, which is seeing a fall in prices, that's also a benefit the industries, because the cost of land in our country was in any project was very high, and setting up industry at with a cost component of 50 to 60% of the project cost can never make an industry viable. So consciously government tried to put down the prices of the real estate so that this black money etc. has been curbed. So this has helped the bringing down the land cost. It's an important area. Though housing sector was facing problems, there government has pushed for the credit availability, and reforms like RERA will help, and ultimately for the consumption and more credit availability for the consumer. The government has asked the institutions, and everybody is pushing for this credit availability to NBFC. That route is also being taken care of. And finally, when government puts more pressure with more zeal on investment of 100 lakh crore, it will create the big logistical difference in the economy through connectivity, infrastructure, rail, roadways, airways. All these are going to give result in the economy. They are showing, it will show, and definitely we will move in the right direction. We are moving, and economy is surely bound to grow. We are facing some of the problems at the export front, but ultimately our domestic industry, domestic market is quite robust, and once the sentiment improves further, it will cyclically catalyze more.
But are we just seeing a problem of sentiment right now? Are we just seeing a problem of sentiment right now?
No, it is one of the,
just a couple of things, Mr. Agarwal. Corporate tax
that
cuts
is one of the
is a big reform, but it's not the biggest. And now we're not even sure how many companies are going to move to it. because of MAT credit issues, etc. So we'll just put a pin on that and hope
But
to see
new
hope
industry,
to
for
see the
new
pass
industry,
over.
this is not a problem.
But there has to be demand, otherwise why is anyone
No,
going to
but for
start
the-
new industries? So it's I'm not saying nothing's done, but I'm saying it's more let's not start patting ourselves on the back yet. That's the only point
Yes,
that is being made. There is a lot more
Yeah,
to be
we
done.
have to move forward with all the challenges.
And
we are determined, we have to move forward.
and
There
I'm
are
glad,
challenges,
and I'm
we
glad
accept
that
those.
and I'm glad that you're explaining and admitting that it's not just a sentiment issue. So which is why not talking about it is not going to help it. Not talking about it is not going to make
Yes.
people splash out, more money, just because no one's saying that there is a slowdown. But what else can we look at? Shriram, let me come to you. Fixing the
Employment generation.
Absolutely. Employment generation is something which will really take the needle forward, or maybe even wage increase for those who are already employed. But Shriram, I just want to focus a bit on the sentiment part of it, because that has also become very talked about recently in the last couple of days especially. How big a role do you think sentiment plays?
Well, sentiment plays a very important role, and obviously if people's incomes are growing and they're feeling good about themselves and their job prospects, and they're not very highly leveraged, households are not very highly leveraged, and obviously sentiment will help, but that is really not the case right now, especially when it comes to household leverage, which, as we have talked about in the past, is quite high and has actually, I think, nearly doubled in the last 5 years. But incomes haven't grown as much. That is an issue, and that is something that the government needs to do something about. The exact policy measures that they need to adopt, I mean, I'm not 100% sure as to what is it that they can do right now, because the one thing that will really increase incomes is higher investment, business expansion. That is a little muted right now, but hopefully one of the most important things that we've about this corporate tax cut, it's not just the fact that the taxes for domestic companies, for existing companies, have been reduced, and there is an issue about the MAT credit on how many companies will shift to the new regime. But the biggest game changer, in my view, is the 15 or 17% tax rate for new investments, especially in manufacturing, especially in new investment in new technology and new companies. I think that is really going to be a game changer. And I know from talking to various people in the market that a lot of companies are thinking of how best to take advantage of it, because this is a huge gift. And you as a company and you as an investor, you are obviously going to want to take big advantage of it, not just Indian companies but also foreign companies. So that's we got to wait and see how this will play out over the next 1 year or so. But I think the initial signs are very encouraging. More people are enthused by this tax rate rather than for the other ones where the tax rate has actually come down to 22% or so. But the most important thing that we got to recognize is that before we ask the government to take policy measures, you got to know what is exactly the problem, that identify the problem and then look at the measure that can probably resolve this issue.
Well,
we talked about GST rate cut for automobiles, but what if the demand in automobiles is not so much about
I'm glad you spoke about I'm glad you spoke about automobiles, Shriram. In fact, a little survey that we did here with the top 10 dealers across India shows that once the clarity set in that there is going to be no GST cut in the foreseeable future, they've actually seen an increase in footfalls and in inquiries. So we'll have to wait and see again how that pans out.
So Tamanna, this is an important area. When you expect that there will be further slowdown, then people postpone the price fall, etc. That people postpone their buying decisions.
Fair enough. But you know what my takeaway from that is? You know what my takeaway from that, Mr. Agarwal, is knowing consistency of policy. Of companies not waking up one day and thinking, now what will the government do tomorrow? Once you know that something is fixed for a foreseeable amount of time, you can plan around it like all of us do individually. I guess it's the same for companies. I'm out of time, but I want to thank all of you all for the conversation today. Most people on this panel see signs of some kind of an optimism, but a lot more work needs to be done. Too early to bring out the party hats yet. But while we're talking about the Indian slowdown and the global slowdown, just want to tell you about this interesting news story that even the United Nations is facing its own cash crunch. The Secretary General, in fact, while addressing the UN's budget setting fifth committee, said that the UN is facing, and I quote, its deepest deficit of the decade. This is because approximately 1/3 of the member states have not cleared their annual dues. India has, by the way, leaving the outstanding amount for the year at $1.3 billion. It's so bad that they may not be able to pay staff salaries for the upcoming month. Let's hope member nations pay their bills and the UN can continue its good work. Taking a very short break. On the other side, we're talking with Mahesh Vyas on IDD Direct, on how he sees an uptick in employment for September. What is beyond that headline? That conversation coming right up.